high Kremlin walls. Then it was a brawling, open-air marketplace, with logs laid down to cover the mud, with lines of log houses and small chapels built against the Kremlin wall, where Lenin's tomb now stands, and with rows and rows of shops and stalls, some wood, some covered by tent-like canvas, crammed into every corner of the vast arena. 300 years ago, Red Square teemed, swirled, and reverberated with life. Merchants standing in front of stalls shouted to customers to step up and inspect their wares. They offered velvet and brocade, Persian and Armenian silk, bronze, brass, and copper goods, iron wares, tooled leather, pottery, innumerable objects made of wood, and rows of melons, apples, pears, cherries, plums, carrots, cucumbers, onions, garlic, and asparagus as thick as a thumb, laid out in trays and baskets. Peddlers and pushcart men forced their way through the crowds with a combination of threats and pleas. Vendors sold pirozhki, small meat pies, from trays suspended by cords from their shoulders. Tailors and street jewelers, oblivious to all around them, worked at their trades. Barbers clipped hair which fell to the ground unswept, adding a new layer to a matted carpet decades in the forming. Flea markets offered old clothes, rags, used furniture, and junk. Down the hill, nearer the Moscow River, animals were sold and live fish from tanks. On the river bank itself, near the new stone bridge, rows of women bent over the water washing clothes. One 17th-century German traveller noted that some of the women selling goods in the square might also sell another commodity. At noon, all activity came to a halt. The markets would close, and the streets empty as people ate dinner, the largest meal of the day. Afterward, everyone napped, and shopkeepers and vendors stretched out to sleep in front of their stalls. With the coming of dusk, swallows began to soar over the Kremlin battlements, and the city locked itself up for the night. Shops closed behind heavy shutters, watchmen looked down from the rooftops, and bad-tempered dogs paced at the end of long chains. Few honest citizens ventured into the dark streets, which became the habitat of thieves and armed beggars, bent on extracting by force, in the dark, what they had failed to get by pleading during the daylight hours. "These villains," wrote an Austrian visitor, "place themselves at the corners of streets and throw swinging cudgels at the heads of those that pass by, in which practice they are so expert that these mortal blows seldom miss." Several murders a night were common in Moscow, and although the motive for these crimes was seldom more than simple theft, so vicious were the thieves that no one dared respond to cries for help. Often, terrorized citizens were afraid even to look out their own doors or windows to see what was happening. In the morning, the police routinely carried the bodies found lying in the streets to a central field, where relatives could come to check for missing persons. Eventually, all unidentified corpses were tumbled into a common grave. Moscow in the 1670s was a city of wood. The houses, mansions, and hovels alike were built of logs, but their unique architecture and the superb carved and painted decoration of their windows, porches, and gables gave them a strange beauty, unknown to the stolid masonry of European cities. Even the streets were made of wood, lined with rough timbers and wooden planks, thick with dust in summer, or sinking into the mud during spring thaws and September rains. The wood-paved streets of Moscow attempted to provide footing for passage. Often they failed. The autumnal rains made the streets impassable for wagons and horses, complained an Orthodox churchman visiting from the Holy Land. "We could not go out of the house to market, the mud and clay being deep enough to sink in overhead. The price of food rose very high, as none could be brought in from the country. All the people, and most of all ourselves, prayed to God that he would cause the earth to freeze." Not unnaturally, in a city built of wood, fire was the scourge of Moscow. In winter, when primitive stoves were blazing in every house, and in summer,